Sometimes you don't need Photoshop, fancy gear, or special overlays to make a photo appear magical. Sometimes you just need a lot of preparation and patience. Such is the case with Philippe Halsman's Dali Atomicus photo shot in 1948. The image shows everything within frame in a state of suspension. After all, Atomicus actually means a state of suspension. The image shows Salvador Dali, the world-renowned Surrealist painter, leaping into the air with paintbrush in hand next to an easel also in midair. His feet are perfectly bowed back as a stream of water, tossed from a bucket off to camera left, curls in an S pattern upwards as if following the path of Dali's body, out the side of his chest and off the frame to camera right. A floating chair, held in place by an assistant just out of the camera's frame, also mimics the shape and balance of the main subject suspended next to his painting and easel. But there's more. 3 cats can be seen tossed into the frame from the right. One appears to be soaring into the water washing towards it. The other 2 are just below the curve of falling water, but tangled together in chaos as the stream of water breaks up into its crest. To the right of the frame are yet more suspended objects, a stool towards the bottom and a relief at the top of the frame sandwich a painting by Dalí himself called Leda Atomica, the inspiration for the very photograph it appears in. Halsman drew inspiration from this Leda Atomica, a painting Dalí started back in 1945 and wasn't released until 1949. This painting depicts Leda, the mythological queen of Sparta, who was married to Tyndareus. As the myth goes, Zeus, the king of the gods, transformed himself into a swan to woo Leda and seduce her on her wedding night. This double consummation led to Leda producing 2 eggs. For the first egg arose Castor and Pollux, for the second, Clytemnestra and Helen. Everything in this painting appears to be suspended in air. The books as steps, the pedestal, the swan, the waters in the background, even Leda herself are all in a state of mid-air suspension. Dalí considered himself to be a painter of the atomic age, and that this new era the world was stepping into had to be assimilated into art as well. Just as particles at the atomic level do not touch, so everything in the Atomica pieces were painted motionless in space. Leda Atomica is organized according to the divine proportion, a rigid mathematical framework and rules of aesthetics. Leda and the swan are set in a pentagon which has been inserted into a 5-point star. According to Dalí, the 5 points symbolize the seeds of perfection: love, order, truth, willpower, and action. Dalí considered that any work of art had to be based on composition and calculation. This painting was still a work in progress when the photo of Dali Atomica was produced, yet its influence would still weigh heavy. After all, the initial idea for the photo shoot, as suggested by Halsman, would have involved a duck being blown up by a stick of dynamite. Dalí rejected the idea, leading to the creation of the photograph we now know today. Somehow, the 2 found a meeting in the middle. Philippe Halsman was a leading portrait photographer, having produced more Life magazine covers than anyone else. By 1948, he was developing a theory he called jumpology. He wanted to lift the veil on his subjects to reveal their innermost being. Having his subjects jump after each photo session, he found the subjects put more attention into the act of jumping, and the mask or facade they put up would fall away, revealing their true nature. Halsman would arrive at this technique later on in his career, following a life paved with hardship. The photographer was convicted of killing his father in 1928, which led to him being sentenced to 4 years in prison, where he contracted tuberculosis. He was released 2 years early following a successful campaign led by his sister and a letter written by German physicist Albert Einstein. Inspired by these events, Jump, starring Patrick Swayze and Ben Silverstone in the role of Philippe Halsman, would be made into a film in 2007. His letters from prison would be published into a book in 1930. After being pardoned by the President of Austria, Halsman left for France to continue his work as a photographer. That was until the Nazis invaded his city in 1940, where Einstein came to his aid again, helping him secure a rare emergency visa to the United States. 7 years later, Halsman's deeply emotional portrait of Einstein would become one of his most famous works. Upon escaping the Nazis, Halsman landed a job with Life magazine. He photographed some of the most celebrated figures of the mid-20th century, from artists to movie stars to politicians. He started off his career shooting fashion magazines and cosmetic companies until eventually venturing out into photojournalism. He had 101 magazine covers to his credit, more than any other cover artist. Halsman and Dali both lived and worked in Paris in the 1930s, but never met until 1941, when Halsman was assigned to photograph the installation of Dali's exhibit in the Julien Levy Gallery. When he photographed the outsized costumes Dali created for a production of Labyrinth at the Metropolitan Opera House, he managed to produce work that evoked one of Dali's own sharply focused, surreal works of art. Eventually, that photograph of a ballerina dressed as a white rooster would earn a spot on Life magazine's Picture of the Week, and the two would become inspired friends ever since. Salvador Dali was known for his paintings, films, and sculptures of melting clocks and dreamscape imagery, and was the leading surrealist painter of the 20th century. He played up on this public persona by taking walks with his pet ocelot and anteater around the streets of Paris, and by the late 1940s, he was one of the most famous people in the world. Halsman and Dali would collaborate on projects in the late 1940s and would span some 37 years. It was a mutually beneficial and creative relationship where the two pushed each other to be their best. So when Halsman set out to shoot his friend and longtime collaborator, he knew any type of simple, seated shot simply wouldn't suffice. Upon setting out to create Dali Atomica, and after the exploding duck idea was set aside, Halsman took inspiration from the Leda Atomica painting Dali had been working on and set on the task of creating an elaborate scene to surround the artist, which would include the painting, a floating chair, and other objects. Most objects would be suspended by thin wires. Assistants helped flesh out the illusion in other ways, such as holding up a chair just out of frame to make it look like it's levitating. Another set of assistants would toss the cats into frame. Yet another assistant would toss up a bucket of water. This was all done on Halsman's count. When the shot was done, Halsman would head to his darkroom to develop the image to see how the composition worked. Again, this was the late 1940s, when there was no such thing as looking at the back of a camera's LCD screen to see what was just shot. Instead, Halsman used a 4x5 format, twin-lens reflex camera which he had designed himself. He developed the gelatin silver photo prints in his own studio. It was a difficult shot to make, and everything had to fall into place just right. Sometimes the water would be blocking Dali's face, sometimes Dali wouldn't jump on time, and sometimes an assistant was in frame. While he checked each image, his daughter would dry off the cats for another shot while someone else mopped up the scene. This was before Photoshop, so everything had to be done in one take. It took 26 attempts, though some say 28, to get it just right to Halsman's liking. When he was done, Dali added a finishing touch to the printed photograph, swirls of paint that appear on the easel. It's often thought two very creative minds would have trouble collaborating, and though Dali and Halsman were both two creative minds, it never felt competitive. Dali never really wanted to photograph, and Halsman never really wanted to pick up a paintbrush. Both artists were at their professional peak, but the road to professional expertise doesn't just happen overnight. There's something to be said when regarding a person by the road they've traveled. The first portrait that Halsman took of Dali in 1941 led to a lasting friendship. He developed a style that others would soon imitate. Before Halsman, portrait photography was often static and slightly blurred. There was usually a detachment between the photographer and the subject. Halsman's approach broke the subject out of the facade and led to a sharp focus as they moved before the camera. His closely cropped, sharply focused portraits were infused with warmth and a sense of humor. He redefined portrait photography and inspired generations of photographers to collaborate with their subjects.